local elections afoot. Could be a bit of a bloodbath for the Tories, couldn't it, Kwasi?
Well, it's very difficult because the last time these set of elections were held was in 2021, and the Tory party was riding high in the polls at that time. So it was a very good set of results. I mean, I remember some of the county elections and results that we had were amazing. Now, 4 years on, all those seats are going to be contested, and I think our percentage rating in the polls is probably about half what it was then. It was about 40%, I think, as I remember, and now it's going to be just above 20%. So you're going to lose seats. I think the governing party will also lose seats. I think they've fallen back as well. And the big question is reform. What are the Reform Party going to do? And in 2021, I don't think they even existed. I don't remember them contesting any council seats. And now I hear that they're contesting 99% of the council seats. So they're going to win lots of seats.
From Labour and from the Conservatives,
I think from
according
both.
to the polls.
Yeah.
Look, could we just hold you there? And we'll come and get your take on this, Nels, in a second, because we've got the Shadow Treasury Minister, Gareth Davies, now ready to talk to us. I wouldn't expect you to admit this, Mr Davies. Good morning to you, by the way. Thanks for joining us. But you guys must be dreading May the 1st and these elections, because Reform, in poll after poll after poll, are in pole position. They look as if they're going to do incredibly well at your expense. You don't care if it's at Labour's expense, but certainly at your expense.
Well, good morning. As you'll expect me to say, polls are polls, and only one poll matters. I'm sure you've heard that before. But it's true.
But sometimes we are crushing defeats, yes. Anyway, go on.
We are campaigning very hard across the country. We've got a number of candidates. In fact, I think we're putting more candidates out there than any other party. And our record is clear at local government. If you have a Conservative-run council, you have lower taxes. Bins are actually collected and not left on the streets for the rats as they are in Labour-run Birmingham. And our roads are better repaired by Conservative-led councils. So that's the message that our candidates are taking out there. Reform haven't run a council before. They've never run anything before. And so it's very clear that we put that out there to those who trusted us previously and are seeing the results that Conservative-led councils can deliver.
Your Justice Minister, your Shadow Justice Minister, Robert Jenrick, who's also, by the way, in internal Conservative Party polls, very much the chosen would-be leader over Badenoch, but anyway, that's something we'll come to later, is openly calling for a uniting of Reform and the Conservatives. Let's just hear what he said a few weeks ago. Now, I don't know how much of that you could hear, but I know you'll be familiar with that undercover recording, that secret recording. That's why the quality wasn't too good. He is explicitly calling for a coalition between your party and Reform. What would you say about that?
Well, Kemi Badenoch is the leader of my party, and she's been very clear that we will not be doing a deal with Reform. She does not believe that we need to do a deal with Reform, and she's been very clear about that. What we do need to do is have a clear centre-right offering for the British public. We were always, since the election, we've been honest and clear that we lost millions of votes to people across to different parties, Liberal Democrats, yes, Reform, who won millions of votes. We've got to win those back. We do that by showing delivery at local government level, as I've been talking about, but also having a clear policy agenda ahead of the next election that I think a number of people who are flirting with Reform will appreciate and come back to us.
Is Kemi Badenoch a problem for the party? In a poll of Conservative members, she's just languishing way down the popularity table. She's sort of satisfaction rating of 9 points. I mean, very, very low. On the other hand, Robert Jenrick, who we're talking about now, way at the top, 71 points. I mean, is Kemi Badenoch the problem, really, when you're knocking on doors?
No. And she's been in position for just 5 months now. She's working very hard to get our party back in fighting shape for the local elections.
So why don't your members agree with you then? What's going on? Why haven't they warmed to her?
Well, that's one survey. I'm not entirely sure the methodology, but I'm not entirely sure the methodology. All my members are pretty positive about Kemi Badenoch, and I think we should give her time to actually, get the party, as I say, back in shape, raise money, get CCHQ back in fighting fit condition, and put in place the measures for a policy agenda that will win back millions of voters that we lost at the last election. Robert is doing a fantastic job. He's one of my closest friends in politics. I admire greatly all the work that he's doing up and down the country, and in the Justice Brief, he's exposed, a series of lack of misunderstanding by the Justice Secretary, and has exposed a number of things I think wouldn't have come out if it wasn't for his hard work. So
well, you're doing a very good job, I have to tell you, for someone whose back is very firmly against the wall as far as the polls, which you say are just polls. But let's look at another poll. If there was a general election today, tomorrow, the day after, currently, Reform would be the largest party. They'd have 180 MPs. You guys would have 165, so would Labour. That's another poll. What do you think about that?
Well, polls come and go. I mean, I would just say we're quite a while away from the next election. I think, thankfully, for probably a number of your viewers, we've got several years ahead of us.
Thankfully for you as well. Thankfully for the Conservatives.
It's bad for the British public if you think about all the tax rises that are going on from this Labour government and the regulation that's going to cripple our businesses. So it's going to be 4 years of hard labour. But we do have time. We do have time to put forward an agenda. A lot can happen in that time. And if you just look at Reform, it's a party of, is it 4 or 5 MPs? I can't quite remember what they started with, but there's one less now. And Nigel Farage is finding it hard to manage just a small group of members of Parliament who could fit in a taxi. I'm not entirely sure they've demonstrated yet that they are fit and qualified to run anything. And we'll be certainly making that case ahead of the local elections next week, that if you want lower taxes, you want your bins collected and you want your roads repaired, it's the Conservatives who can deliver that.
Do you secretly rather admire Nigel Farage?
Do I admire Nigel Farage? Yep. I mean, I think, you've got to appreciate the fact that he's been a big force in British politics, but I think that's as far as I would go. I think in terms of running the country, running the economy, and making sure that we have the solutions to the problems that we face today and 4 years from now, it's Kemi Badenoch who'll be the Prime Minister to be able to fix those.
The interesting thing is, of course, that, you can talk about sort of trying to get the party back on its feet, and that's what Kemi's trying to do at the moment. The problem is that many of your grassroots supporters say that there just aren't enough policies. I mean, they just don't know what you stand for. They don't know what you're thinking. They don't know what you want to see. She's been too slow, hasn't she? That is what's coming through. 55% of your party think that she should be moving faster to develop policies.
Well, policies are being developed, but it's right that as we've just faced the electorate only last year, and we, I don't need to point out to you, we had a bad election. We lost millions of votes, as I've said. And so we do need to take time now to reflect on that and to develop a policy agenda that can win those voters back. And it is important that we use this time to do that. There are areas, though, that she has been very clear on, and the values that drive my leader and my party. We want to push people up who want to succeed, not pull them down when they do succeed, which is what's going on with the Labour Party. But all of this will be coming through in the years to come. We've got plenty of time until the next election.
Well, you've got May the 1st to get through first, but thank you so much. Gareth Davies, Shadow Financial Secretary. It's interesting, isn't it, Nels? He says we've got to take this time, but politics is moving so fast. There is so much happening in the world that needs clear leadership. And I just wonder whether this time should be spent being bolder for the Conservatives.
It certainly should be. Well, they are being quite bold in certain areas. For example, Robert Jenrick is really innovative. Robert Jenrick is running his brief like he's running for leader of the party in real time. And he's really taking the party very, very far to the right. And that's why he's, of course, moving up in the actual polls. That's how you win in the Conservative Party. But I think that they've baked in mass losses in the local elections coming up. I don't
baked it in for who? Baked it in for Kemi, or could there be a contest for the leadership?
No, I don't think
you think Kemi's in for?
I don't think there's any appetite for that.
She won't be there. Will Kemi still be there at the next general election, leading the party if Robert Jenrick?
I've been in the party for 30 years, and there's always a leadership crisis. All I can remember from most of that time is, the 54 letters or however many letters there were, the votes, that we need to get a new leader. Even with Cameron, there was an issue in 2013, and there were people. So I think now we're in opposition. I don't think there'll be much appetite to go through all of that again.
Not right now, but can you see in the next...
What if he wipes out in the elections on May the 1st?
So I don't think... Well, I think a lot of that, as Nell said, is baked in. I mean, that means that people are assuming
it's going
to be tough. For the reasons I said earlier, the fact is these elections were last held in 2021. We were on about 40% in the polls in 2021. And today, we're about 23, 24, whatever it is. But it's a much lower number, and that means we'll lose probably a lot of seats.
A phrase, I phrase that I find myself using more and more on this programme is, I'm old enough to remember... I'm old enough to remember the Gang of Four and the SDLP and their emergence in the 1980-81. Yes, indeed. Led, of course, by Mr Glamour Pants, Dr David Owen. And for a brief period of just a few months, it looked as if they were going to break the mould. It really did look as if they were going to take over from Labour and become the main part of the opposition, if not government. And then... they faded like apple blossom in the spring, and we virtually didn't hear from them again. Is that possibly the fate for reform, or is this different with reform?
I feel, well, in the 80s or so, there's no such thing as social media. Media was a lot more centralised, so it was a lot more difficult to get your message across. It was a lot more difficult to actually break politics. What reform has done, and also what reform has done is actually led by a guy who's been a juggernaut in British politics for a very long time now. And I fear that what we are seeing now is almost like the European election-ification of our local elections, possibly the general elections.
That's a good analogy.
That UKIP, the same way which UKIP used to just dominate the European elections, you're now going to see it with reform in actual national local elections over here too. But I don't think that's actually inherently bad news for the Conservative Party in the long term, because people need to be exposed to what reform will be like in positions of leadership. And if reform don't do well, as I'll probably put money on them not doing, and more than a few cranks emerge or so, and people have to deal with those cranks on a day-to-day basis in their local government, it really makes it hard for them to put their case forward with some credibility in 4 years' time when it comes to actual leadership of the actual nation. So I think this could potentially benefit the Tories in the long term. And finally, I'll say this too. Credit to Badenoch, where Jew or so. She actually had a very, very good day yesterday in Parliament at PMQs, and I think she had a very good day, principally because of the fact that this is what yesterday's main topic was about, is essentially what Badenockism is about. Give me your beleaguered minorities, and I'll give you mincemeat. And that's pretty much what she does, essentially. That's her. She's found her position. She found her stride on trans issues, racial issues, and she flew yesterday.
On reform, I always say this, and people get bored of it, but it's happening all over the Western world.
Yeah.
You look at the rise of Trump. You look at Le Pen in France. You look at the AfD in Germany. You've got populist right parties, if I can describe them in that way.
Which what the Conservative Party is now.
The Conservative Party has to compete in that arena. So all I'm saying is that, unlike the SDP, which was very much a national phenomenon,
this is a global trend.
What's going on is global. And so whether you've got Badenoch or Jenrick or whoever, this reform threat won't disappear overnight. Now, I think you're right. It could fade away. But again, the polls could be right in 3 or 4 years. We just don't know. And all I would say about polling in midterms is that I remember the Hartlepool by-election. Labour lost that, and immediately afterwards, everyone said that Starmer's out. That he was under pressure. It was the polls and the commentary was very bad for him. They had another by-election, I think it was Hayward and Middleton, where they won by 300 votes, Labour. If they'd lost that election, he probably almost certainly would have been removed. So these things are very finely balanced, and it's very difficult to say 4 years out what the result will be.
I must ask you, the nation knows you're a betting man, that you're somebody who likes to take a punt on things. Would you actually... hold just a quick question. Would you be willing to put £50 on the fact that Badenoch is not leader of the party at the next general election?
I would bet that she will be there. I'm not going to turn that.
Take it.
You've ambushed me there.
2 to 1.
I'm not going to shake on that.
There we go.
We used to say, I think, a sportsman's bet.
Well, let's change the record.
He'll come running for it if he wins.
Let's change the record. Donald Trump seems unable to say anything critical about Putin, doesn't he? And his latest statements from the White House over the potential peace deal are unambiguous. One, the war was started by Ukraine, which the rest of the world knows it wasn't. And two, in order for America to back a peace deal, Zelensky and Ukraine has to accept that the Crimea is Russia in permanence, and almost all the territory that's been stolen from Ukraine in the last 3 years by Russia will stay Russian. What's going on in the White House?
I think, to be fair, Donald Trump is not entirely wrong what he said about Crimea. That Crimea was taken in 2014, was annexed in 2014, and the contest wasn't there to take it back. There was no military response. There wasn't a robust military response to it or so under the Obama... I believe, we're still under the Obama regime. So in him saying that is not entirely wrong. So the expectation at this particular time, more than 11 years later, is the fact that, look, standing your ground on Crimea right now is not going to actually help you bring an end to this war, which is not entirely wrong.
Because it's a fait accompli.
Which is not entirely wrong. But I must say this, too, at the exact same time, that how Trump has actually positioned this is not, again, it's not as mad as it sounds. Because the war is absolutely... We're not seeing it as brutal as it is. In fact, I don't think we're getting a good actual overview of actually happening here. Because when you take a look at what's happening is that we've personalised this war to Zelensky. We don't really know much about the politics behind him and who's actually... and what his local politics are or so. So we don't really know whether or not he has that authority or power to really actually make this actual negotiation and end this war in good faith, as he should be doing right now. Because Donald Trump is actually right. So without America's backing, they will essentially be losing the entire country in 3 years' time.
Yeah, but what you've just said at length has totally ignored the moral case of the Ukrainians.
No, I accept that.
Putin, sorry, give me. Putin essentially annexed Crimea illegally.
He did.
And to our shame, we did very little. I remember I was in Parliament at the time. 1 or 2 MPs were raising this issue, and the government simply ignored it.
And it emboldens.
Of course it does.
An authoritarian
figure. Zelensky can't agree to endorse essentially Putin's illegal.
No, and there is a
acts.
fine line, isn't there, between saying, look, what's done is done and we can't undo the past. But what the tenor of what Trump seems to be saying is, I recognise it as Russian territory. Those are two different approaches, aren't they?
Very different
and the problem with Trump is that he seems to be almost pro-Russia as opposed to be going, I'm being practical. It might be a tonal problem, it might be a problem of language, but let me tell you what he said on Truth Social yesterday. He, meaning Zelensky, can have peace or he can fight for another 3 years before losing the whole country. He goes on to say, the statement made by Zelensky today will do nothing but prolong the killing field, and nobody wants that. We're very close to a deal, but the man with no cards to play, meaning Zelensky, should now finally get it done. The killing field is not being created by Zelensky.
Indeed.
Exactly right.
It is not Ukraine's fault.
Indeed.
Sure. So that's the problem, forgive me, that's the problem that Trump's approach is highlighting. He's essentially endorsing the illegal acts by saying that, you know, Zelensky's got to come to the table and deal with Putin and accept what's happened.
Yes.
You're essentially asking Zelensky to condone the invasion, more or less.
And to carve
that's impossible.
Carve up what was a sovereign country.
That's right.
And give parts of it away. Not just Crimea, but give more of it away.
That's right. I don't think Zelensky, in all credibility, can agree to that.
But at the same time, too, this is really, really vicious stuff that's going on. It's an absolute tragedy for the Ukrainians. And my heart, for the Ukrainians, of course, in particular, and my heart goes out to them because we must be clear here. Donald Trump is pretty much on the Russian side here. There's no two ways about it. And Donald Trump has all the cards to play. He's removing support, he's removing money, he's removing actual weaponry or so, and it's going to make this significantly more difficult. More Ukrainians are going to lose their lives. And it does feel that the idea in which Vladimir Putin knows that there will be a robust response to any move he makes, should he choose to make any move into the future. So the idea now has to be a way in which we find some degree of agreement to move towards some degree of lasting peace, if possible. Maybe I'm being a bit naive here, but I don't think I am. I just feel that this has to come to an end.
I think Nels is right. I think Putin has... Trump has essentially said, between these two, I'm going to go with Putin. And that's made Ukraine's position
yes.
very difficult.
It's part of the reason for that. We'll move on to another subject in just 1 second. But I don't want to invite conspiracy theories here, but everybody increasingly is working hard to work out what Trump's motives in almost every field that he's operating in are, and it's very hard to detect them. He's spoken about taking Greenland into America. Yeah, sure. He's spoken about annexing Canada. Are statements like that, do they predicate the fact that he's going to find it hard to condemn what Putin's done when he's almost considering doing something similar?
Well, he clearly is fascinated by strongmen.
Yeah.
You know, he talks about President Xi, he talks about Putin. It looks as if he really respects these strong leaders, and he talks about that pretty openly. And I think what he's doing in Russia, Ukraine, is essentially just acknowledging, saying, look, this is the strong man. He's actually made things happen. You guys are toast.
What I'm saying is, though, if he condemns Putin, then actually it undermines his claim to take Greenland and to take
I think
Canada.
it's slightly different. I mean, I think what he's doing there is essentially just moving the debate. The fact that we're talking about Greenland, the fact that we're talking about Canada...
You think it's hot air?
He's essentially won, because he's sort of got into our heads.
Yes.
And we're discussing whatever crazy
I'm not
thing...
sure that
Let's
I'm not
move
sure
on.
Mark Carney sees it that way, but yeah, please.
Let's move on and talk about domestic issues here. Rachel Reeves, obviously we've got the constant conversation about what this US-UK trade deal might or might not include. She's ruled out chlorinated chicken, she's ruled out lowering standards of our food in general, or the online safety bill, or the NHS, so she's ruled a lot out. But when it comes to what she can do here in terms of boosting our economy before all of that, we've overspent by about 15 billion, haven't we? That came out yesterday. I want to know why, Kwasi, as a former Chancellor, why have we overspent?
I think, well, I looked at the capital economics and some of the commentary, and you've got a lot of wealthy people leaving the country. I mean, if you look at
why does that mean we've overspent by 15 billion?
So it's not the overspending. It's the way it's framed is that you're borrowing 15 billion.
Yeah.
OK, so if you're borrowing money, that means you're not earning the money. And the reason you're not... one of the reasons, and it's up for debate, but one of the reasons you're not earning the money potentially is that a lot of wealthy people who are paying tax have simply left the country.
To the tune of 15 billion?
Well, it's part of it. It's part of that.
Right.
There are other reasons. For example, you know, some of the wage deals that have been done with the unions. I mean, that's obviously helped the unions, but that's going to push up your costs. So I think that this is a big problem, because what will happen in the autumn is the OBR will say, OK, this is how much the economy will grow next year. And if they reduce that number, she'll have to raise more money in tax.
So tax or cuts again? But
I don't think there's... The appetite that the Labour parliamentarians have for more spending reductions is very limited. So in that case, I think you're looking at tax rises. I'd be very surprised if there weren't.
More domestic issues. I'm fascinated by this one. We all remember the TV watershed. I think it was 10 o'clock.
Yes.
Yep.
And swearing and explicit sex scenes and everything couldn't be shown before 10 o'clock. TikTok are announcing a watershed for kids not being able to access TikTok after 10 p.m. at night. And this chimes in with Ofcom introducing a whole raft of new measures, which we'll be talking about with the head of Ofcom later, to basically detach kids from damaging websites. What do we think about the watershed idea?
I don't think children should be on TikTok. I don't think if you're... But particularly young children, particularly by young children, I mean children under the age of... To me, personally, under the age of 16 or so, that's what the law says.
They shouldn't be, but they all are, I'm afraid.
It really does surprise me that I see... So there's children in my daughter's class, for example, who have smartphones and are on TikTok. My daughter's 11. It really does shock me that, that's being allowed to happen.
Would you say the same about Snapchat, that they shouldn't be on Snapchat?
I don't think they should be on social media at all, because it's become a source of fights and bullying in different schools, a source of distraction. So I don't think that... I think it's a misnomer. I think in this situation, the responsible thing for a responsible social media platform to do is say, once you hit 16, hop on board or so. But for now, this is not for you. This should be very, very grown-up stuff.
I kind of agree with Nels. I mean, I think, and we've talked about this many times, the way in which society has changed, particularly with regard to social media, some of the violence that social media inspires, a lot of the brutal things that you can see, I don't think government and the laws that we have really kept up with that change. And we always talk about, we're old enough to remember all of that sort of thing.
And I'm always...
Yeah, you're always saying that, and I say it to a lesser degree. But I think this is one of the areas where there's been huge change in terms of social media, in terms of access to violence, like access to things like pornography, vile abuse. And this has happened in the last 20 years, really. And our society, our laws, haven't really caught up with that. So I'm very much more sympathetic to restricting the access that children have to this...
Well, we'll put that to the head of Ofcom.
Yes.
Please, Nels, we're out of time.
Final point. Shall we... We're going to be debating later the Lib Dems proposal about fining people who play music loud on public transport. Yay or nay?
Nay. It's just poor people you'll be fining.
Is it?
Yes, it will be principally for poor people.
Is it antisocial people?
No, it's number one, it's poor people who catch... It's predominantly economically challenged, but it's not the richest of people who catch public transport. But also, too, that sort of social expression or so, sometimes I want everybody to hear my music, or I can't afford headphones, it's more likely to be poor people than it is likely to be anybody else.
I agree with Nay, no, but not for those reasons. I think it's impractical. I don't know how you enforce that. Because as soon as the train guard or whatever comes, you just turn it down. And then what?
You also risk violence, don't you? I mean, these days. I mean, I wouldn't dream if I was on a train of saying to somebody, would you turn that down? Because I don't want a knife between the ribs, you know?
Yeah, there's that too. I don't see... The idea that you're going to fine them £1,000 on the spot, I think, is not practical.
All right,
yes,
well, we'll talk about that later.
It would help.
Households in the south of the country face paying quite a lot more for electricity under plans being considered by the government. with the prices being determined by the supply and demand in each area.
So supporters say it could cut bills overall, while opponents argue, of course, that it will create a postcode lottery on our bills. Energy Secretary Ed Miliband joins us now. A very good morning to you. Lots to talk to you about. Talk to us about this, though, this regional pricing idea. How far along the line are you? And essentially, how can it possibly be fair that those perhaps in Scotland, where there is an abundance of wind energy, would end up paying a lot less for their electricity usage than people in the south?
Well, first of all, Ranvir, it's copper-bottom nonsense, as the Telegraph is apparently saying, that we've made a decision on this. And we're still looking very carefully at it, first point. Secondly, it wouldn't be fair to jack up prices in one part of the country and then suddenly cut them dramatically in another. Any reform we will make will be about cutting bills across the country. And I'm absolutely determined to do this. And we're going to take our time over this. There's different views in the industry. Lots of people are at odds about it. But my bottom line is any reform we make, if it's going to cut bills, it's got to cut bills across the country and not have a postcode lottery.
So that's an absolutely clear-cut reply, a very clear-cut answer. There is no prospect of people living in, say, Winchester and Exeter paying any more for their electricity or gas than somebody living in Glasgow or Edinburgh. Not
well,
going to happen,
at the moment, Richard, some people pay more than other people already. But what I'm saying to you is that any reform we would make, if it's about cutting bills, and it's got to be about cutting bills, in my view, is going to cut bills across the country, not have a postcode lottery where we suddenly jack up bills in one part of the country.
Couldn't be clearer. Let's talk about net zero. You've got countries like China building more and more coal-fired power stations. You've got a new president in America with the slogan "Drill, baby, drill," and a complete climate skeptic. The fact of the matter is that our carbon emissions are minuscule compared to, say, China's and America's, and increasingly America's. And yet it's British people who are going to be paying the price for net zero. Should we be stepping back a little from that deadline?
That's not the way I see it, Richard. So today we're announcing £300 million for Great British Energy to invest in factories to manufacture parts for offshore wind, matched by the private sector. It's going to create jobs for welders and engineers and construction workers. And that is part of the fundamental truth here, which is, first of all, this clean energy transition is about a massive economic opportunity, which lots of countries, including China, by the way, are leaping into and are fighting for, and we should fight for it too. Secondly, we can only have energy security if we get off fossil fuels. Why did prices go through the roof when Russia invaded Ukraine? They went through the roof because we're dependent on those fossil fuel markets controlled by petrostates and dictators. Unless we have homegrown clean energy, we'll never get off that situation and we'll never cut bills. And the last point is, it's the right thing to do for future generations. But this is not just about climate, this is about energy security and good jobs and growth.
But you can still have those policies, can't you, without careering towards zero carbon emissions by 2050. Whilst that was a noble aim, there is a lot of mood music. I mean, Nigel Farage said yesterday that Britain should not have any policies at all that are intended to tackle the climate crisis. Of course, many might disagree with that. But the point he's making, as has already been said, is that the British people will pay the price and the effect overall on the climate will be minuscule. So the cost-benefit analysis of net zero for the British public just doesn't hold up at this stage.
That's just wrong, Ranvir. I just fundamentally disagree with Nigel Farage. And to be honest, he's got an ideological and extreme view, and he's trying to use anything to try and pretend that this is about putting up prices. Why did prices go up? I go back to this point, when Russia invaded Ukraine, because of fossil fuels. There's only one answer to this. Because we're in the control of these global markets, there's only one answer to this, which is homegrown clean energy we control. So the case for action on clean energy is not just the old case of climate, which I believe in, it's the new case for energy security. If we have that wind power, that solar power, that nuclear power, we control it. We control the price. At the moment, we're on that roller coaster of the fossil fuel markets which we don't control and which are controlled by dictators like Putin. And that's where Farage would leave us. He'd leave us in the grip of Putin. Putin's boot on our throat. I don't think that's what the British people want.
Well, let's skip from across the pond, from Putin to Trump. You're in the Labour government. What does the Labour government do with the policies that you're espousing here and following through here, with an American president who is a climate change denier, in a way we've not seen in the White House until now? How do you deal with a president who says that everything that you're saying is nonsense and that man is not responsible for rising temperatures and the change in the climate? How do you deal with someone like that?
Here's the answer, Richard. He pursues his national interest, and he was duly elected by the American people to do that as he sees fit, and we pursue ours. And then we seek to find common ground. There are some things that we can work together on. Nuclear power, for example. They're not doing it for climate reasons, but the US administration believes in nuclear power, for example. We should cooperate with them on that. But, you know, we've got this big international summit happening, 60 countries around the world, in the next couple of days. The vast majority of countries are seeing, as I do, the move to clean energy as the right thing to do because they see the energy security benefits of it and they see the economic benefits. Just to give you one fact, 80% of the new investments last year were in renewables and nuclear, not in fossil fuels. That is, despite President Trump, that is the direction in which the world is going.
An investigation by this programme has shown that physical assaults and verbal threats and just general harassment are just some examples of the daily abuse now being faced by ambulance staff at record levels in the UK. And this is coming from the patients that they're just trying to help. In a moment, we're going to speak to two London Ambulance Service paramedics who have faced attacks firsthand. But let's take a look at some of the shocking statistics that we've uncovered. OK, UK Ambulance Services now suffer the highest rate of violence that's ever been recorded. Over 22,500 incidents across the country's 14 services in the last financial year alone. That is up 15% on the previous year. This means that every day 62 ambulance workers will be abused or attacked. 62 that's worth repeating, isn't it? Yes, a day. 62 a day. Paramedics Gary Watson and Charlotte Miller join us now alongside Chair of the Association of Ambulance Chief Executive, Jason Killins. Good morning to all of you. Charlotte, let's begin with you. What happened to you?
Well, I was working just a sort of normal, generic ambulance shift with a female crewmate. We got called to a job to help a male patient. As we were getting the patient into the back of the ambulance, the patient sexually tried to touch me. He grabbed me, yeah, basically grabbed me. After I told him to stop, he persistently tried to do these things again. Not only that, he exposed himself to me and my crewmate and gave quite a lot of inappropriate sexual references. And at this point, you're inside the back of the ambulance. So you're in a confined space, as it were. Space, yeah. And you've already taken on the responsibility. Essentially, you've taken the job. You're there with this person. Sure. At that point, I mean, obviously, you feel deeply vulnerable. I'm assuming in that situation, and you've been physically groped and attacked at that point. What did you do? Initially, I requested the police, emergency police assistance. It was a very difficult and challenging situation as we waited for the police. You know, there was still continuous sexual references and we were in a very, very busy street, but equally we felt quite scared and quite frightened. Absolutely. Within that situation. So what happened? So the police arrived, the person was arrested, was taken to the police cell, statement was given, and the person was convicted and given 9 months in prison. Good. Excellent. Right. And there was CCTV... There was. In the van. You weren't wearing... Were you wearing a body cam footage at the time? We didn't have the body cams at the time, but I have got the body cams now, which I wear on a regular basis. And the remarkable thing is that you then just went back on shift. Pretty much, yeah, straight away, pretty much the next day. It's remarkable. I asked you in the break, how long did you take off work before you went back? And you said, a couple of hours. Yeah. I mean, pretty much. Was there a suggestion that there was nothing wrong with him at all and that you'd been summoned there on a pretext? It was a bystander that called for an ambulance for this person, but unfortunately weren't able to assess or find out what was wrong with the person because it was difficult. because of the assault itself.
Absolutely dreadful.
Well, I find it remarkable. I know Ranvir does as well, that you went straight back to work. It's extraordinary, and it's more than any of us deserve. Let's come to you, Gareth. What happened to you?
So back in 2018, I was working similarly on an ambulance, was called to a male that was collapsed in a doorway. Two of my colleagues, solo responders, were already there. And the handover was that this gentleman had been out drinking the night before, and he had possibly been mugged, didn't have his phone, didn't have his wallet. He was quite emotional at the time. So our plan was to get him into the ambulance and find out a little bit more about him, and if there was nothing physically wrong with him, then maybe make some phone calls, get him home, get him to a place of safety.
Look after him.
Look after him. Do our job, exactly, yeah. Within seconds of getting onto the ambulance, this gentleman shot up from the bed and has attempted to kick one of the solo responders out of the side door of the ambulance.
Well, with no warning? No build-up to this?
No, nothing. Within seconds.
God.
Which was obviously very shocking straight away. And then he's then turned round, grabbed myself. I've been pinned down onto the bed and being punched, being throttled. My colleague has tried to get him off of me, which he managed to do. And then he's then turned round to my colleague and done the same to him, pushing him up against the wall, trying to headbutt him, strangling him.
When you say wall, were you outside at this point?
This is in the ambulance.
Oh, so inside the ambulance. So again,
ambulance,
a confined, small space.
Yeah. So and it went back and forward. I'm being attacked, my colleague's trying to get him off of me, and then vice versa. So the panic button was pressed, which goes straight to our control room. And the police were activated straight away. From the minute the button was pressed to the police arriving was 8 minutes. So there was an 8 minutes of continuous
and you had body cam.
So we didn't have body-worn cameras at that time.
You didn't have them?
No, they were introduced in 2021.
Well, is that what you're wearing
This
now?
is what this is the body-worn cameras that were introduced, yeah.
So what was the upshot?
Sorry?
What was the outcome?
You must have been terribly injured, obviously.
Yeah, so the police arrived, drew a taser, and then he finally stopped.
Oh, they tasered him?
Yeah,
right.
They didn't taser him. They drew the taser and red-dotted him, and then he put his hands up and it stopped.
Which suggests that he was aware. Oh, he was aware of himself. If a red dot could make you stop, I mean, it's not like he was...
Yeah.
He was aware in some respect, he was
like
drunk or whatever.
Just a sudden stop, put his hands up and stopped. So then he'd been arrested. I've left the ambulance, sat on the side of the road, and one of the other solo responders come over and was tending to me. I'd quite significant facial injuries.
Yeah.
I had a partial torn rotator cuff and back injuries.
Absolutely.
And was off work for 3 months. So
actually, the trauma, the mental trauma goes on for much longer than the physical, doesn't it, for both of you and for your colleagues?
Yeah.
What are the conviction rates like? What can you do about this? Because I think it's absolutely remarkable that both of you even dared to go back to it. If somebody attacked me in my workplace and I thought that was just part of my job, I would not come back to this studio. I just wouldn't. Why would I? But yet you go back. So what is it that you want to see change? Because it is record numbers of attacks now.
Yeah, that's right. So we're seeing record numbers of assaults on ambulance workers across the UK. The numbers, the new data tells us it's 1 every 20 minutes. Somewhere in the UK, an ambulance worker will be assaulted every 20
So there'll
minutes.
be another 2 and then before the show comes off air?
Yes.
Indeed.
So conviction rates, what are they like?
So we do have specific offences for assaulting emergency workers here, and we do see convictions, as we've heard, custodial sentences issued. But with the scale of the increase we've seen, a 15% rise in the last year, we've written to ministers across the 4 nations of the UK now, asking for dialogue about what more can be done to deter instances of assault.
Tougher sentences?
Well, possibly tougher sentences or other potential interventions, because what we see, as you've heard from colleagues here, is a lasting impact from these assaults. It's not just what happens in the moment, it goes on for months.
Or a warning, or I don't know what the legal requirements would be, say, if you abuse me during this process, I will have to step away.
Well,
presumably, are you allowed to say that? If you were are you allowed to stop treating someone at the very first instant you go, sorry,
well,
you know, we can't, we're not able, we're not going to treat you now?
The safety of our people is paramount, and if our people are in danger or seriously, you know, believe that there is going to be harm to them, they can of course step away. We do provide, as we were discussing earlier, you know, training to de-escalate situations, but of course that's not always sufficient.
Two questions. What happened to the guy who assaulted you? Was he convicted?
So he got a 12-month suspended sentence.
Suspended?
And a drink and drug rehabilitation course.
Right.
And there was, I think it was a £150 compensation to myself, which I've not seen a penny of that.
No.
You haven't seen that?
Can I ask, in your case, Charlotte, did you, A, go to court, and B, what did the perpetrator say about... Was there any remorse or anything?
Yeah, I didn't have to go to court
Good.
because they managed to capture enough evidence. And they had the CCTV at the ambulance and also my crewmate's witness statement as well. So I didn't have to go to court myself, but he went to court a couple of days later and then got the 9-month sentence plus a fine as well.
Any
of
remorse,
£180.
nothing, no...
No apology?
No.
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 And finally, last question. Obviously, assaults have always taken place, but this is a dramatic increase, 15%, as we said. What's behind it?
Well, we see alcohol and drugs as a common feature in assaults on ambulance workers. I think, you know, some patients and bystanders do get frustrated. Sometimes they have to wait longer than we would like for their ambulance to arrive.
So they make an assault on the people who come to help?
But that's never an excuse to assault our people, or our call handlers, of course, who are subject to verbal abuse too. Sure. Never an excuse to assault our people who join the job to provide great care to patients and help them when they need it most.
You don't think they should maybe carry tasers themselves?
Well, I think that would start to shift the role that we have and create, I think, a number of other challenges we'd need to work through. But the message to the public, to the community, is work with our people, not against us. They can't look after you if they're fighting for their own safety and that of their mate.
It's just a disgrace. And you're amazing. Thank you both very much for coming.
Thank you. And thank you for going back. I mean, you know, the next elderly person who rings up will need you. And I suppose when you get a call, I suppose you hope... Pray to God it's not somebody violent in the street, but it is somebody that you can actually help. I mean, you must... Do you carry fear when you go into your job every day now? An element of it?
Yeah.
An element of fear. You don't know what's coming.
No, do you?
We do our job because we want to help people. That's why we get up and we go to work.
The mental toll must be a lot.
And that's why we do the job, because we love it, and that's what keeps us going.
Yeah, well, thank you to all three of you, but certainly to both of you, certainly for sharing what's happened to you, and I'm glad you both got convictions.
We're joined by the broadcaster Nels Abbey and the former Conservative Chancellor Kwasi Nels, who have been patiently watching the programme this morning. Let's talk about Ofcom, Charlotte, first of all. We had the head of Ofcom in because this is the day that they announced much greater restrictions on the big providers on the internet to regulate the material that kids have access to. And we put it to her that maybe the answer to this is actually simply to stop children watching and joining these websites in the first place, not until they're, say, 16. So in the same way as you wouldn't let a child into a strip club or a sex club in the three-dimensional world, in the 2D virtual world, you don't let them go onto sites which have this kind of material.
Yeah, look, I agree with you. I think we've got to be much stricter on allowing kids access to this very harmful material. And as I've said, we haven't really caught up as a society, as a government, in politics, with the massive change that we've seen in the last 20 years, where kids can look at beheadings on social media.
Beheadings.
Teenagers. I mean, can you believe that? And I think we've got to be much tougher on this.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more that you cannot unsee once you've seen something. No. And once a child's seen something or so, that's it. You've transformed pretty much their life.
While their brains are still
very much information.
But the point is that Dame Melanie Dawes, who is head of Ofcom, has said that today is a game-changing moment in her point of view. So what they're trying to say is that the new rules to stop children from seeing adult content, either they have to block it, the social media companies, or they have to remove it, and if not, they could face £18 million fines or 10% of their global revenue.
I think it's a step in the right direction.
Is it a game changer? Because Ian Russell, father of Molly Russell, says it absolutely isn't. It's cautious, it's risk-averse, and it's putting cash above harm.
It might be a game changer, but doesn't change the game enough. No, it doesn't transform the game as a problem. That we really need, that this is a serious, serious problem for us as a society. We need to make sure that children there shouldn't be any tinkering about it. Children shouldn't be on social media.
So are you saying that these changes from Ofcom are tinkering?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I don't think children under 16 should have smartphones. I really
Well,
don't.
that's
I don't
quite
think.
restrictive.
I don't think that children under 16 should have smartphones, and they certainly shouldn't be on social media. This, I would honestly. I met a friend of mine the other day said that he would rather give his children cigarettes than actually let them have access to social media. It's that bad. It really is that bad.
It is bad. I'm not sure how draconian and tough you want to be on this, but clearly, you know, it's not a good world where 13-year-olds can see people actually being beheaded.
Yeah, I mean, we all agree on that. I suppose what we disagree on is how, and is Ofcom doing enough for Davies?
I think it's a step in the right direction, but I think we, you know, people who are older, people who have kids like many of us, I think we don't realise how appalling the situation is.
Yeah.
And it's not just about online content that you can see. It's the abuse as well.
It's what you don't see also. That WhatsApp, for example, is just...
And I was talking to a friend of mine, he's got a 13-year-old daughter, and she's got one of these phones. And once she's in her room and the door's shut, the parents have no idea.
No idea, yeah.
No idea about the abuse, no idea about the really horrible content that their daughter...
So if you were to bar access to those sites completely, they had to provide ID showing that they were 16 or over or 18
yes, with the credit card checks and the facial recognition.
It's possible to do that. Then you wouldn't have that problem because you know that they couldn't access the site.
And also, you know, we talk about, you know, we used to have videos, you know, back in the day, people, and you had to show ID to rent the video of a film. I mean, that principle is well established.
Yeah. OK, well, she says it's a game changer, so we have to give her credit and give it time until July.
Yeah.
The other heated debate of the morning is, what do you do about people playing noisy music or playing films without headphones on public transport? What do you do?
I think you've got to say, please turn it down. I know it's scary and intimidating. Ultimately, I would do that. I use the London transport all the time, and I find really, really loud music incredible. It's not only rude to the other passengers, it's just really disrespectful. I mean, why should you impose your music on everybody else?
Fines?
Well, no, I wouldn't.
The Lib Dems want to fine them £1,000.
It's interesting. The Liberal Democrats are the people. The Liberal Democrats are
led. They're not liberal. We know that.
Liberal Democrats are led by the man who boosted the popularity of his party by dancing in public and playing music out loud in public. So it's interesting that he's now rug pulling here, dare I say. But I must say something else too. There's a young man who has become famous in Britain for playing music out loud in public. His name is DJ AG. He is a cultural phenomenon across the entire world. He plays music out loud. I first saw him in Wood Green, now he's in King's Cross. He even plays music in retirement homes, and he plays music out loud on airplanes.
He's invited.
On airplanes. So he's not just invited. No, he does this
on the plane.
He was getting arrested when he was doing this to begin with. So he has become an international phenomenon or so. And I must say, in defence of DJ AG or so, to make sure it doesn't get caught up in the Liberal Democrat clash down,
shut this noise down right now because we're out of time.